Welcome to Rock City Cookies, where we talk about all things cookies. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button and click the bell icon to be notified when we upload a new video. Thanks for watching. Hey sweet friends, thank you so much for tuning back in today for another full tutorial. Today I'm going to explain to you how I made each one of these designs for my daughter Isley's 6th birthday. So sit back, relax as we start with our first design, the hearts. This heart cookie shape was actually a cookie cutter purchased from Cuts. I've mentioned them before. They're a fantastic cookie cutter company, but I'll be sure to link this cookie cutter down in the description box below. To start, you are going to want to outline this cookie in a thick consistency icing. Now I chose to outline this cookie in white, and all of the cookies that I'm doing today will actually be outlined in white as well. And you'll see it really doesn't matter if you have the right consistency of a flood icing. It doesn't matter too much what your outline color is, because when you outline and flood right away, your flood should cover that outline. However, I do typically try to match my outline with whatever color I'm using to flood, just to keep it simple. However, today I'm doing rainbow colors and I don't want to just do a random rainbow outline. So for me, it was just easier to stick with a white outline and do all of my cookies in that, since I had so many different colors in this set. With the rainbow as my inspiration, I chose to do 6 colors in this set. I wanted all of Roy G. Biv represented. So I did kind of a pinky red for the red. I did a peach for the orange. I did yellow, green, blue. And for indigo and violet, I just did 1 purple. This heart cookie cutter is kind of skinny and it's on the smaller side. So I wanted to make sure to split up the rainbow into 2 different hearts for this cookie. That meant instead of trying to squeeze 6 colors onto a small surface, I could actually do 3 colors on one heart and 3 colors on the other heart. But in order to keep that set consistency of doing everything in the same rainbow order, even though these were 2 different heart cookies, I wanted to make sure I still honored that in this design. So these cookies here will be the pink red, the peach, the yellow, while the other cookies you just saw me decorate will be the green, blue, and purple. As I'm finishing outlining these 2 cookies, I wanted to explain that I often put 2 cookies of the same design on my turntable at one time. It really helps to speed up my time whenever I can pick up 1 color and put it on 2 cookies at one time, instead of constantly picking up new bags over and over and over again. So that's why in this set, you'll see me do this quite a bit. I'll put 2 cookies down on my turntable at once. Cookies take forever, so if you can find anything like this to help speed up your time, it really is beneficial in the long run. All right, I haven't really explained what I'm doing here, so I'm going to do that now. With my colors on this heart, I knew I kind of wanted the colors to blend together, almost like they melted together. So I'm putting my icing down in kind of a wave pattern, just so that my 3 colors blend together, not in a straight line, but more of a fun, whimsical pattern across the cookie. One of my friends here on YouTube asked me recently how they can prevent color bleed. And I know that's a real concern when you're putting colors right next to each other. And as you can see, I have a pink, I have blues, I have purples. So I have colors that are saturated. And when you have colors that are that deep and dark and rich, you do have a concern for color bleed. And I really don't deal with color bleed that often. The only time I have it happen occasionally is whenever I have a white character eye and I'm putting black icing in the pupil. Very rarely, but sometimes I will get a tiny bit of color bleed there. But other than that, I really do not struggle with this. And I think I have a few theories of why. One, my icing is not very thin. And I think if you have thin icing, you have a greater chance at color bleed. Number 2, make sure your colors are not oversaturated. Put as much coloring as you need, but not more than you need. Because I freeze all of my leftover icing, it is really rare for me to ever start icing completely from white. I usually color it from other colors. So I think that helps because I'm not having to add a whole lot of new color into my batches. So that's something to consider. Reuse your old icing, always use that as a base if you can. But if you have to add color, try to do as little as you can. Now you still need to get the color that you need, but don't put more than you need. Another problem can be your humidity. I always have more issues with my icing if it's a humid day. So if you have a lot of humidity in your area, you might want to consider putting a dehumidifier in the room that you're working with, and I really think that'll help stabilize your icing. My final tip is put your cookies under a fan to let them dry. So as soon as I ice my cookie, it goes under a fan. It helps to crisp over quickly so that your colors don't have time to sit there and bleed into one another. I hope one of those things helps you if you are having issues with color bleeding. Okay, by adding a little heart on top, our heart cookies are done. Now let's make some rainbows, because after all, rainbows were the entire inspiration for this set. Now the only outlining I'm going to need to do for this cookie is just right at the top of my rainbow. That prevents any of the icing from spilling over the edge, but otherwise I'm going to be working inward, and the very bottom is going to be clouds, so I don't need to worry about that part at all. So as long as you just put one little bitty outline around the top edge of your cookie, that's all you'll need. Using the same icing that I'm using to flood all of my other cookies, I am going to go through and add one arch of each color in rainbow order. So again, Roy G. Biv. And yes, even still at 36, I use the mnemonic device Roy G. Biv to help me remember rainbow order. So over and over in my head, before I picked out any of the colors, I would say Roy G. Biv, Roy G. Biv, Roy G. Biv. Now, in my research of how to say mnemonic correctly, because my goodness, I had the hardest time spitting that word out, I ended up going down a rabbit trail of how that Roy G. Biv is actually a misnomer. Isaac Newton was not correct in saying that the colors of the rainbow are red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. Believe it or not, purple is not even in an actual rainbow prism. If we see a rainbow in the sky and it has purple in it, it's an optical illusion. It's caused by the light refracting and the raindrops in the sky. And the blue in the Roy G. Biv, the blue is actually more like cyan, and then it goes blue. So really, the order of the rainbow is more of Roy, red, orange, yellow, G for green, and then it's C, B, so cyan and then blue. Isn't that crazy? I never knew. The more you know. Now that our science lesson is over, I'm almost done with these rainbows. I'm going to pipe a blue, and then I will finish it off with our purple color, which we now know shouldn't even be there in the first place. But purple is my daughter's favorite color. So even if I would have known that fact before I made this set, I still would have included it. And because I'm doing all of these colors next to each other while the icing is still wet, they are blending together as I work, which is going to give us a nice smooth surface. Now, before the next step, you want to make sure that you allow these rainbows to dry. So I did put them under a fan for probably an hour or two before I did this next step. Now, to make these clouds, it's just a thicker consistency of icing, so it does hold its shape. I cut the piping bag with a pretty wide opening so that I could get this kind of a look. And then, as you saw, I just moved my icing around randomly to create the appearance of clouds. And because I think it's really important for set cohesiveness, if I add small details to one cookie, I like to repeat that in other cookies. So I added a small heart to our heart cookie, so I'm going to add a small heart here on our rainbow as well. And that's it. Our rainbow cookie is done. And I did forget to mention, this is actually one of our cookie cutters. It's our rainbow cutter, so that is listed in our Etsy shop, which will be linked below. Okay, let's move on to our next design, which is going to be on a long hexagon shape. Now, this cookie cutter is also listed in our Etsy shop below, but I love its versatility and I use it in a lot of my sets. Now, I am going to be giving this cookie a rainbow background. So the first thing I'm doing here is just outlining our shape so that the icing stays put and does not run off the edge. Now, I have 6 colors that I'm going to be trying to put all on the background of this cookie. So So I'm kind of honestly just eyeballing it. I'm putting just little sections of each color. I'm adjusting as I go. If I think a section is a little too much, then the next section might be a little bit smaller. This isn't perfect. It's not an exact science. I just tried to make sure that I had enough space for all 6 colors on the cookie. And again, I'm doing a wavy line instead of a straight line to keep a more whimsical look where it also kind of the colors blend together instead of having that hard edge. Now, it's also important that you work at a somewhat decent pace. Now, this is real-time decorating, so this is exactly the speed that I worked in real life. So you can see it's not too fast. I mean, this is not lightning speed, but it is fast enough that my icing is not crisping over before I'm moving on to the next color or getting all of the colors flooded. This is important because you need to have a smooth finish where it all blends together and you have a flat surface. And you also need to have time to be able to go back and pop air bubbles in maybe those first few colors that you did, which means if you worked too slowly and your icing has dried too quickly or too much, when you pop those air bubbles, it'll just leave a hole in your icing. It won't smooth back out. So obviously you want to work at a comfortable pace. And one of the ways that I help myself whenever I have a lot of colors like this is I have my icing bags lined up in color order, ready to go right next to where my workspace is so that I can just grab that next color without having to think, put the color back down on my paper towel, move to the next color over and over again, and it just helps to speed up that process when you're doing a whole lot of colors at once. Okay, now it's time to pipe the name onto the cookie. And again, I made this set for my daughter for her 6th birthday, so her name is Isley. And again, I'm using the Choco Cookies font because I love it. It's one of my favorite fonts. I use it all of the time. It will be listed in the description box below. And I use a Pocket Pico projector. It's the AXAA Pocket Pico projector. I did purchase it on Amazon. There's a lot of different accessories you have to have with it. So make sure you do your research before you buy any projector because a lot of times you do have to buy additional cords like I did. So I will plan on doing a video on my projector soon, but you can see which one I purchased by looking in the description box below. Now, just as a tidbit, this icing that I'm using to do all of my detail work on top of the cookies, the little hearts, her name, all of that is the exact same icing that I use to outline all of my shapes. So again, it's another way that you can save time by making a consistency that works for doing any writing or any detail work on top of your cookies, and also using that same icing to outline your base flood. Okay, because the background of this cookie was so colorful, I don't feel like I need much of anything else since her name is on it and took up most of the cookie space. So our long hexagon cookie with the birthday girl's name on it is complete. More than anything else, my daughter is completely obsessed with flowers. So I knew I wanted to incorporate flowers in 2 different ways into this set. The final design, which I will talk about next, is just an actual flower, but this design I wanted to do a hexagon background with a flower on top. Now this hexagon cookie cutter is listed in our shop. I'll be sure to link it down below, but I chose this specific shape because I wanted to kind of make a nod to the cookie that we just did, the long hexagon. I didn't want to do another long hexagon, especially since the flower isn't that shape, it's more of a circle. And I knew that that circular flower would look good on a hexagon shape, but also this hexagon is complementing the long hexagon that I've already done in this set. Okay, so this time I kind of wanted to do something a little bit different with my colors. So I started with 1 strip of color in a wavy line going down the middle. After I piped the pinkish red stripe down the middle of the cookie, I then went with my next color, which is my peach, and I put the icing on both sides of the red color. And I continued this process, working my way to the outside of the cookie, constantly doing 1 color on both sides, keeping in mind symmetry. Now, is it perfectly symmetrical? No, of course not. Is that a big deal? Nope, not at all. Now I still have 2 colors to go. You can kind of see space is getting pretty tight. So I'm going to be really careful with my blue to make sure I leave enough space for at least the purple to have a little bit of room. All right, once the purple is done, then you're going to go back and carefully pop air bubbles. I haven't mentioned it yet, so I'm going to do that here. When you're popping air bubbles and you do multiple colors on your flood with the wet on wet look, make sure you're really, really careful when you're popping air bubbles. The reason for that is because you don't want to drag your colors into the other colors. You don't want to have all of your lines mixed up. So even though these are a wavy line, I still don't want my colors mixing together. And your scribe tool can very easily accidentally blend your colors together, drag your red into your orange or your yellow into your green. So just make sure you're very, very careful. Very lightly touch your icing to pop those air bubbles. And whenever you do have to drag your icing a tiny bit to pop an air bubble, make sure you're staying in the same color zone, not dragging it to a different color. Okay, now that our flood has dried, let's pipe on an outline of a flower. For this image, I just went to Google and searched for a simple flower outline, and I found this one, which I thought was perfect for the design that I was wanting to do. So to begin, I'm going to do all the forward petals first. So I'm just outlining every other petal basically at this point in time. Now let's go back and link all the flowers together, doing the back petals next. So just a real quick little outline, linking them together on the back of the flower. And let's turn off our projector, and now we can see the flower better, and we are able to go in and just add some details to the petals just to kind of make them look a little bit cuter, a little bit more like a flower. And then after we finish up with these details, then we will go in and do the center part of our flower just by doing some squiggly lines over and over as we work our way to the center of the flower. And that's it. Our flower on a hexagon cookie is done. Got a little bit of a hippie vibe, doesn't it? Okay, our final design is just a regular flower. Now this cookie cutter is a sunflower cookie cutter. I believe it's Ann Clark, and I'll link it down below. It was a metal cookie cutter. So even though I'm not using it for a sunflower today, I still am using it for a flower cookie. Now to help guide myself with where to start my petal, I used a piping tip, a large one, so that I had a pretty decent sized circle. But really you can use any circle that you want. You can trace around a circle, a lid, a sprinkle lid, really anything that will give you a guide. But I did use a piping tip just to indent my cookie a little bit so I knew exactly where I needed to start each flower petal so that they all had the same curvature. Now this cookie cutter has 10 petals, which means I could have used 5 colors twice on the petals. So that's what I did. So I did 2 petals for every single color. I would do one side of the cookie, I would rotate my cookie turntable all the way to where it was on the other side, and immediately do the opposite side of the cookie with the same color. Now, in full transparency, one of the reasons why I ended up doing these petals this way with just this back and forth motion with thick icing was because I ran out of my flood icing. So sometimes even carefully laid plans, you think you have enough icing and you get down to your last design and you just don't have enough to do it. It happens to the best of us. So instead of just throwing out the design, I decided I would just do these easy little petals with a back and forth motion and hope that it turned out okay. Now, I was lucky that this set was for my daughter and not for a client. If it would have been for a client, I probably would have gone back in and made additional flood icing. However, I was exhausted. I had finished up 15 dozen cookies that week before I made my daughter's cookies, so I just went with it. In the end, she loved them, and really, she's the only thing that matters to me, so I was glad that she ended up loving the flowers anyway. I got lucky. Okay, now that our petals are almost done, I actually have 6 colors in my set, but as I said, I did 5 colors for the petals, so that means for the 6th color, I will use that that as the center of my flower. Now, if this would have been flood icing, I would have had to let all of those petals dry before I did this next step, but since it was the thicker icing, the detail icing, I was able to just go ahead and flood right on top of those petals. Now, I used quite a bit of icing because I really wanted to build up the center of that flower, and I wanted to make sure that the tip of all the petals were covered, so I used quite a bit of icing here. With my scribe tool, I just went through and carefully smoothed out this icing, giving it a little bit of a jiggle as I'm working, which also helps to smooth out your icing. If you can't pick up your cookie and give it a good shake, using your scribe to jiggle the icing a little bit also helps to smooth it out. Okay, now I'm gonna stick this under a fan and let it dry before I pipe the final detail on top. Okay, let's finish off this cookie by adding the birthday girl's number, which she was turning 6 years old. This font is the same exact font that I used to do her name in on the long hexagon cookie, and again it's called Choco Cookies. Okay, our final cookie, the number 6 flower cookie, is done, which means our whole set is now in the books. My daughter ended up loving the set, and I hope that you did as well. If you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to ask in the comment box below. I am always so happy to help in any way that I can. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.